Hi, this is Mr. West, Rossit's Most Stylish. Today I'm here to talk to you about how to answer the source question, which forms question 1A in AS His2m. It's always going to be based around the idea of how far the views in one source differ from those in another source, and then there'll be a theme, in this case, young people in Nazi Germany. And what we've got to think about, first of all, is what the general impression and tone is of the sources, okay? So that's my first bit of advice. What is the tone of the sources? Okay, that's the key thing. Now, that's a good place to start, alright? We can see here that the tone of source A is actually quite negative. Cannot share in the enthusiasm, oppressive memories, entirely of boring military drill, okay? And it gives a quite a negative impression. Whereas source B, okay, it gives a very different impression, okay? A glimmer of hope, okay, for everyone. Alright, and it was a good time, alright, and there's order and discipline. So when you see that tone, you want to then think, well, generally, what is the tone, okay? Is it positive, is it negative, alright? And you want to start with that, and you want to think, right, they're both actually very different, alright? And that's perhaps the place that we want to start with this. So we've established what the tone is, let's start with that. So, and get over to where it differs, alright? Now, as with anything, you want to think about starting, as I say, with that, the tone, okay? And you can see that's what I've done here. Source B is positive in the tone with phrases and words like good time and spoke fondly. Source A is negative in its tone towards the HJ, boring and oppressive memories. So that's the first point there that I've picked. And obviously I would start the sentence with the sources differ in the nature of their tone, or in their tone, something like that, yeah? Alright, and then from that, what we need to try and do is to plan up any other ideas of where they do differ. Now, the first thing that struck me about these sources was the impact of the parades. What did each source think about it? Source B speaks fondly, okay, of the amusements and celebrations, whereas source A refers to boring military drills. So they differ on the impact and the value of those parades, okay. Also, there's this idea of hope, alright. The sources differ about that. Source B talks about the glimmer of hope for everyone, whereas source C talks about the idea that on the top people put the boot in and were successful, and there was little hope for those below. Yeah. Also, we can look at the provenance. All right. One of them is from a boy, one of them is from a girl. But the key bit that why the provenance is important is it gives us a chance to think about our own knowledge. Yeah, what is that we know about that we can use in this, okay? And clearly it comes around the idea of Nazi ideology, alright? Obviously source A is a boy, so this idea of them growing up to be political soldiers should be something that we're thinking about. Whereas source B is from a girl, so they're going to be quite like partners of those soldiers and be housewives. So clearly that own knowledge is going to affect the provenance, and we need to somewhere in every one of these answers include some own knowledge, alright? We've also got the issue of the value and the purpose of let's just get rid of that own knowledge. The value and the purpose of the sources, okay? Source A gives the value of the Nazi policies in a critical way and believes them to have an ulterior motive, alright? It says, if you look at the source, whatever just a second. Whatever in the grip of ambition, those who did well are promoted, and it kind of talks about this. Well, there's a violence if you didn't do well, okay, and that's like an ulterior motive. Whereas source B views the Nazi positives in a positive light, yeah, and believes them to be creating a better Germany. All right, the Nazis were better than what had gone before. Okay, now then. So we've established the tone, the impact of the parades, the hope and the provenance. Then we'd also need to think about what agrees. Obviously a one-sided answer is bad. Now to start off with, we know that when we've talked about the provenance, that they actually disagree and one's a boy and one's a girl. However, both sources are recollections of life in the 30s made well after the event. So the type of sources is actually very similar. And they both talk in an agreeing sense about the issue of discipline within Nazi Germany, the fact that it was a constant. Okay, Source A emphasises the blind obedience of the Hitler Youth, whereas Source B talks about the whole time as a period of order and discipline. So that's that. So when we're answering this question, we've obviously got to do both sides. We've got to look, first of all, you probably look at it, say, difference, because that strikes you. Okay, good. instantly there's differences. Then we look and try and get some agreeing. If we don't get any agreeing, or we can't get enough of it in, we're really going to struggle with that situation. So we need to get agree going there. Having then done that, what we also need to try and do is to try and include some of our own knowledge, like we've done here. Okay, and we could develop that about Nazi ideology. Once those things are checked off, both difference in agree and some own knowledge, we can start to form a conclusion. Now, I would always recommend adopting a certain approach to answering the conclusion. Okay, and that's adopting this approach, looking at what it says on first inspection. And on first inspection, the sources seem to differ a great deal. Their general tone and the views of the Nazi motives are very different. All right. Now, I'm not going to repeat in my conclusion what I've said in the main body of the piece. That would clearly be a waste of my time. I don't have enough time as it is on this exam. But what you would want to do is to try and say, well, just some brief explanations of where they are different, all right? And then, upon closer inspection, we see that there are some similarities about Nazi attitudes to discipline and the fact that they are both recollections, spelt wrong, written well after the time. And then, despite these similarities, I would have to conclude that these sources differ to a very large extent, as the tone and content offers largely opposing viewpoints of the experience of young people in Nazi Germany in the 30s. Now, what I've done there at the end is I've also tied it back in directly to the question. If we look back at the question, we can see that it says young people in Nazi Germany in the 30s, and I've done that. So when you're writing your conclusion, you should try and adopt at least a two-part, if not a three-part section of it. All right, and I would always say on first inspection what the impression is, and then give me some very brief examples about why that is the case. Then a closer inspection, and obviously you'll see the opposite viewpoint, and again a couple of examples of that. And then, what is your overall answer going to be? Clearly, in this case, the sources do differ to a large extent, and I'm going to say that and directly link it to the question. However, it might be that the sources agree to a large extent, and it may also be that on first inspection they differ. However, when you look at it more closely, there is actually a huge amount of similarities, and that may be your answer. But I like that style of conclusion because it's a short, snappy way of getting a good argument across. Thanks.